Welcome to the Joint Legislative Oversight and Sunset Committee hearing. My name is Senator Kyle Evans-Gay. I'm the chair of the committee this year. As we do with all of our meetings, I'd like to start first with our committee members introducing themselves. And the first on my screen is Representative Yerrick.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Representative Lyndon Yerrick. I serve the 34th Representative District in Central Kent County. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Spiegelman.
Representative Jeff Spiegelman, 11th District, straddling the Kent County, Newcastle County line on the western side of the state. It's a small state, but there's still a west and an east.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Pinckney.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Senator Marie Pinckney, representing the 13th District, covering parts of Newark, Newcastle, and Bear.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Bryant Richardson, representing 21st District, and it's using Spiegelman's language, hugging the border between Maryland and Delaware in Western Sussex County.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Stephanie Hansen, 10th Senate District, and I'll use the language of Senator Richardson, hugging the Maryland border in Newcastle County, spanning from Middletown to south of Newark.
Thank you so much, Senator, and welcome everyone. I'd also like our staff members to introduce themselves. Amanda, can you kick it off?
Good morning, everyone. I am Amanda McAtee. I am one of two analysts for the committee.
I am Mark Brainerd Jr. I am the other analyst for the committee.
Good morning. I'm Holly Vaughn Wagner. I'm the committee's legislative attorney.
Hello, my name is Natalie White. I'm the administrative support staff for the committee.
Good morning. My name is Elliot Gray, and I am the legislative fellow for the committee.
Thank you very much to our staff for being here. I know today's going to be a day that reflects a lot of the hard work that you all have put in so far. But before we turn to our draft legislation, let's take a look at our May 4th, 2021 draft minutes. They're going to be on the screen. And if there are no questions or comments regarding the draft minutes, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Thank you, Senator Pinckney. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please signify by your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the minutes pass with flying colors. I think we have a little bit of background noise. Okay. Oh, and before we move on to our main topic area, I'd like to introduce our committee vice chair, Representative Dorsey Walker.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. All right. And so the first thing that we're going to tackle today are 3 draft bills that the committee received. I'm going to turn it over to Holly, who's going to give us an overview of each of those.
Thank you. So these are 3 drafts, none of which should come as a surprise. We're going to be talking about the technical corrections bill for the Delaware Health Information Network, a bill that does a couple different things for the Council on Correction, and then a revised draft for the DIAA's out-of-season coaching. So first up is the DINS technical corrections bill. This is a pretty straightforward bill, despite being 17 pages. The only substantive thing that this bill does is update the board of directors removal language, and that is to make it standard to the language that we're trying to make standard for all boards and commissions. So that isn't even about this group in specifically. This bill has a delayed effect to accommodate the other DIN bills that are in the works, so that the code revisers know if the other bills pass, not to have a jam up between these as conflicting bills. This bill will take effect second to the other DIN bills. The other thing is that at the end of the bill, you'll see there are effective clauses for 2 sections of the bill, and that is because this bill only cleans up existing language, but we have other DIN bills that make substantive changes to those sections. So if those bills pass, then what this bill does to those sections will not take effect. And that's fine because the other bills also make technical corrections. So to make a long story short, the effective date language towards at the end of the bill is really just technical stuff to let the code revisers know how to let all of these bills work together. So that's really the presentation for this technical corrections bill. I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
Are there any questions from the committee members regarding the language of the draft bill? I appreciate that the work that went into this and recognize this as the technical corrections bill. I wanted to flag for the committee some of the logistics relating to this bill, just so everyone is aware of, as we move this bill along, how that affects the DIN review. And I'm happy to turn over to Amanda afterwards for any clarification from the staff side. But essentially, once this bill, if it's released and adopted, this bill, when adopted, would end the DIN review. So DIN would be released once this bill became law. And that is important to understand because we also, as we all know, have seen additional bills relating to DIN that came out of the task force that was established as a result of the sunset review of the entity. So some of those bills, I believe, are now in House committee. Some of them are awaiting a hearing in the Senate committee, and I believe there are several others that are still in the drafting stages. Representative Dorsey Walker and I had a conversation with counsel for DIN and made them aware that, you know, we are interested in moving this bill forward, the technical corrections, which would have the effect of releasing DIN from review, but made them aware that that doesn't foreclose the other work that is being done, and made, you know, a commitment to work with DIN to understand how we can continue those bills through the political process in the House and Senate. I think we will talk in our chamber committees about those bills. I believe some of them are actually awaiting a fiscal note, which may hold them up a little bit. But I assured our staff and I assured DIN that that's something that we all can handle as members of those chamber committees, and committed to working together to make sure those issues are put forward. Was there anything, Amanda, that would be helpful to add from that perspective?
Thanks, Madam Chair. No, I was just gonna just touch on that to add that in February of 2020, sorry, the years are blending together. February 2020, this committee adopted the recommendation to release DIN from review once this technical corrections bill was adopted. So that you're correct in that summary that that's where we're at this point. I don't have anything else to add. You covered everything very nicely, so thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions about the logistics there or how these bills may be handled going forward? Okay, wonderful. I know we do have, I know we need 6 for the vote today. I think we do have 7 now, so we should be good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep. Is there a motion regarding the technical corrections to the DIN statute?
Motion to release.
Thank you, Representative. Is there a
Second.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Any further discussion or questions regarding the draft bill? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to release this bill, please signify by your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, hearing none, this bill will be released, and I'm sure Holly can take care of that on the back end, and we look forward to reviewing them in our chamber committees.
Yes, thank you. And as I release these and numbers are assigned, we'll get you all those bill numbers so you can track them as you would like. Okay, excuse me. So next is the Council on Corrections draft bill. This one does a couple different things. First, there are general technical corrections being made. For example, with the way appointments are structured, term limits, removal of members, meeting locations, and quorum. So we've added a lot of the standard language that we're trying to make consistent across the code for all these boards and commissions and such. We also, one of the recommendations for this group was to codify their bylaws. So you'll see lines 22 through 73 specifically codify the council's mission and duties. So that is where that language comes from. This bill also adds a requirement that they submit an annual report. That's on line 65 to 75. That was another recommendation that came out of Sunset. And then finally, the big thing that this bill does is implement a pilot program where the Criminal Justice Council will provide this council with staff support and materials to assist council in holding their meetings and fulfilling their duties. I believe another aspect under assisting them is CJC has trainings that are available that the council can take. I believe the trainings are related to how to hold these meetings, how to make them effective, that sort of thing, although maybe Mark can correct me if I'm wrong about exactly what the trainings were. So that is the overview. We have general technical corrections and then several components that are meeting the recommendations that this committee voted on in previous years. And with that, Mark may want to give a brief overview because we haven't talked about this council yet this year, I don't think. So I'd like to turn it over to him.
Thank you. So this review predates Amanda and I. The council has been under Sunset JLOSC review since 2018. Amanda and I took up the torch on this one in 2019. So many of the recommendations that are reflected in the bill come from 2018, the annual reporting and the bylaws and the creation of them. The one lines 76 onward, that was something that was approved through a JLOSC recommendation in February of 2020. And this, I did want to say that this bill has been seen by the Department of Correction as well as the executive director of the CJC. They both had really little to no comments, but the director of the CJC did want to stress that this bill would not make the council an official CJC subcommittee. So while they can take care of notices, agendas, minutes, and other admin functions, the CJC will not be able to have an impact specifically on the functionality, like whether they choose to meet or consider certain agenda items, fall behind on their mission, etc. He just wanted everybody to know that CJC would have little recourse in that, which I believe, and members who were here last year can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was kind of the intent, which is why this was a pilot program. This was kind of a sink or float moment where, if more oversight is needed after 5 years, if this doesn't work out where, the council still is not fulfilling that mission and still having issues with meetings and reporting, et cetera, that this group can consider additional oversight.
And thank you, Mark, for the additional background. And apologies if I missed this in the materials, but at least in the report, the previous report from we'll call the COVID year, right? It noted that there was not the feedback or the reporting that you had asked for. And I was wondering if there has been in the interim since you wrote that report feedback.
Yes, they in the interim of putting that report together in January of 2020, I believe it was the vice chair of the council and the secretary of the council came to the February holdover meeting with the report. that they were asked to submit prior. So I believe I attached that to what I sent around yesterday. It was a pretty extensive report, and
Thank you.
sure. Again, this is a volunteer board. They have no budget. They don't, you know, they serve at the pleasure of the governor. So it's very, very difficult for a body like that with no admin support to really put together something in a timely manner. So this is kind of where this staff support idea came from, where, you know, let's try to get them some help so they can spend their hours volunteering on this council to actually fulfill the mission of it.
Thank you for answering that. Representative Yerrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just maybe some thinking back. Thanks for the refresher, Mark, Holly, that literally, yeah, it's an all volunteer group made up of probably one or two people whose mission is just to try to bring community together with corrections to try to address things that are going well and maybe areas where there's some disagreement on how things are going in Department of Corrections. And the administrative piece was literally just to try to help them get meeting notices out, maybe help schedule them, but to try to be a conduit to corrections and community in all three counties, and just give them a little bit extra help. So that was, as Mark explained very well, that was the intent of the recommendation that he just referenced. So just thought I'd add that. Thank you.
No, yes, I appreciate it, because for those of us who didn't see presentations related to this, it's a helpful context. Are there any questions or comments regarding this draft legislation? I know we got lots of background information, so that's helpful. Is there a motion regarding the draft legislation?
Motion to release.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Representative Bruce Walker. Thank you, Representative Yerrick. Any additional comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to release, please signify by your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, motion's adopted. The draft will be released, and we will be hearing it in Chamber Committee. All right, Holly.
All right, thank you. So the last bill to present to you today is for the DIAA. You saw a previous draft of this on Tuesday regarding out-of-season coaching. I've made a few tweaks based on our conversations. I think it's important to understand this bill, it doesn't give DIAA the authority to regulate organizations or the behaviors of coaches in their own time. And that is something DIAA has wanted to make clear. They don't want that authority. They don't have that authority. So there are tweaks to this that make it clear that this bill, it allows DIAA to regulate the standards that would then trigger this exception to the code of conduct. So the DIAA is not regulating the organizations and the coaches as much as they're saying, okay, here's the circumstances under which you can do this out of season coaching without violating the code of conduct, whether you're paid or not. So to that end, I changed some of the language on line 7 so that it now says providing out of season sport that they meet the standards established by regulations. So DIAA is not regulating them, they're regulating the standards. On line 10, there was some tweaking there to make that clear again. Let me see. Oh, and so on line 15, one of the items that was in the resolution, Senate Concurrent Resolution 79, was for the regulations to include a limit on the number of students who could participate in on an out-of-season team. Through their meetings and their work, DIAA have indicated that they don't know that they want to set that limit or if it's appropriate for them to set that limit. So I have tweaked this to say that at a minimum in their regulations, they do need to address whether it's appropriate for them to set that limit so that it is addressed, it's not overlooked. And if they determine that they should set that limit, what that number is. So that is sort of the most significant change here. The other things are really just to massage the language to be more clear. I think those are the only changes since Tuesday. So,
Holly, 2 questions. One is the language in the resolution regarding the number of athletes. Did you interpret that to mean the number of athletes on any one school affiliated team, or a kind of gross number of athletes across the state? I mean, I'm confused as to where that or why that was put in there.
right. I want Mark to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that what that means is the number of students from the coach's school who can be on that team, not the number of athletes total that can be on the team, if that's what your question was.
Yes, that's right. The threshold that a coach can coach their student athletes out of season.
And as a matter of clarification, should we, as obviously this body has voted to hold DIA over, and so we will have continuing conversations, should we find that a number or a number is advisable as we learn more and as we see this in practice, could this code be modified to provide for a number if we wish, or a percentage? Okay, I see you nodding. So
absolutely.
You're like my worst witnesses in court, Holly. We need to say yes or no.
Yeah, one of the benefits of holding a group over is you can see, as assuming that this bill goes through the entire General Assembly and is enacted before next January, you'll be able to see in action, does this bill fulfill what you intended it to fulfill? Does it need tweaks? I mean, you can certainly always come back and you can amend any statute you care to. But specifically with this, we can mark that as something to watch to see if it's something that needs to be revisited.
Okay, that's awesome. And I do know, and I think everyone here knows, but for everyone watching, this bill reflects one of the many iterations that our staff and especially Holly went through with trying to figure out the way to thread this needle to make sure that we take into account the needs of all the stakeholders and the legal implications of prior Public Integrity Commission opinions that were really a barrier, we think, for DIAA in taking the steps they need. So thank you very much. And I said 2 questions, but I had added one. So my last one is, in your opinion, does the current language protect or prevent the bill won't go into effect, obviously, until we have rules promulgated. We know that DIA has put rules out there, but they don't necessarily address everything under B2, and specifically B2A. So will this bill, in your opinion, it will not become effective until B2, A through D are satisfied? Is that correct? The language protects us there.
So technically, the bill takes effect as soon as it's enacted. So as soon as it's presumably signed by the governor, it takes effect. Okay. The exception to the Code of Ethics will not be able to be triggered until these items are addressed in regulations.
Understood.
So the law takes effect, but the exception doesn't really work until all of those. It's a tiny nuance, but it's there. So I do think that I had a note. There's one in particular. I think that line 15 and 16, I think that is the one that they haven't addressed yet. Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. And so that was part of the reason we reworded it this way. I guess they have tried to do this and for reasons that I don't personally know, that this is not something, they weren't able to set that number. So they will need a little bit of time to make sure that that list is complete. But I think most of them, they've already sent proposed regulations. And again, they just have to send the proposed regulations. They are not responsible for those regulations, making it all the way through the administrative procedure process and being enacted, but they have to get proposed regulations so that the process gets started.
Thank you. And I know they are nuances, but it's really helpful, and I appreciate the detailed explanation. I know Representative Dorsey Walker had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lines 15 and 16 for our attorney. I think that issue is for some of the smaller towns, in particular in Kent and Sussex. Well, if we put a number on it, that could be problematic for DIAA. So my concern is for the smaller towns where the coach tends to be the coach for the football coach tends to be the baseball coach, and maybe even well, can't be soccer coach if it's a football coach, but in the basketball coach, and then the out of season, that could be a problem for some of our smaller towns. So how do we plan to address that?
So under this bill, DIAA is permitted to determine that it is not best for Delaware for the very reason that you cited. This gives them the flexibility to decide whether they should establish a number or not. The only thing that this bill requires is that they indicate in the regulations that they decided not to set a number, or if they decide to set a number, what that number is. So I worded it this way because it was important under that resolution that it be addressed. We now have information that tells us why we may not want to set a number, but it seemed important to me to at least require that it be shown that it had been considered, that it doesn't look like they just dropped the subject altogether.
Understood. So then what this does is it's actually a protection for some of our smaller towns where the coach tends to be the coach for various different
Right.
sports. Okay, thank you for the
Yes.
clarification.
Sure.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Yerrick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to those lines. I read it, the intent is by putting a number, it's looking at a percentage of my middle school or high school students. What's the percentage that I would be allowed to have on a travel team? For example, is it 25% of my kids? Is it 50%? Is it 100%? I read it is that the challenge or the risk is that if I allow 75% of my high school basketball team to play under my travel team, is that in sense really another 3 or 4 months of practice and playing for my high school team? That's how I read it. That what is the percentage? It's not 5 players or 10. It would be a percentage of players coming from that middle school or high school team on my own travel team. That's how I read that. A second point from that, what if we put a percent in there, say 50%, and then a coach is found to be guilty of an infraction that he or she's having 75%. Is what you're saying is that DIAA does not want to be the enforcer of these items if there is a abuse of one of these standards? Is that what you were saying, Holly?
So that is my understanding, that we want them to be in charge of monitoring which organizations are meeting these items. And so we know if the coaches are working under these restrictions or not, but they would not have an enforcement mechanism. I think that, I think the idea is that should they discover there is a violation, it becomes a code of conduct issue for the Public Integrity Commission. And so I would defer to Mark about some of those details, but I think that they want to say, look, this is not something that we regulate, so we aren't the enforcers on this. So I think that, and to your earlier point too, yes, I totally agree that I worded it in a way, I say limit the number, right? Well, I say the bill says limit the number. So if they determine that number is a percentage, if they, I wanted to leave it as broad as I could, so that DIAA are the experts on this subject matter, right? We want to give them the space to do what is best based on their expertise. So I think that this covers both what we talked about earlier and the point that you made. I think it can work that way too. My intent was to make it broad enough for it to work for them how they need it to.
Any follow-up, Representative Yerrick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the code of conduct and what commission or committee would get that, and just in my opinion, I think that would need to be addressed somewhere, that most laws and rules and regulations are set up to unfortunately impact the small percentage who abuse those laws or rules or regulations. That maybe it would be in everyone's best interest that they do have some predetermined method that if I'm a coach and Senator Gay is a coach and we compete and she finds that I'm abusing one of these, she should, and there has to be a process, I would think, that allows it to be clear ahead of time of how it's going to get addressed. It may not show what the consequence could be, but it would show how that infraction is going to get addressed in a proactive way. So thank you for that.
And I think I'm going to go to Mark. I do have, I think, hopefully some clarification I can add as well, Representative Yerrick, but I want to make sure Mark has a chance to respond from the analyst point of view.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. In its regulations, DIAA throughout, whether it's transferring or something to that effect, they do put a lot of structure in there to address violations and penalties. That it gives the board the power to investigate, conduct hearings, send letters of reprimand, probation, suspension, fines. It allows the board a lot of leeway to do that on a case-by-case basis. And in the published regulations for this issue, they do provide that language in there that the board has the authority to investigate any sort of violation of this.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm not as great at explaining the nuances as Holly is, but I'm going to try. So here's how I view the intent of the statute. And our staff and folks can jump in if needed. The real holdup here was that we had this Public Integrity Commission. The Public Integrity Commission, of course, responsible for enforcing the Code of Conduct, state employees' Code of Conduct, of which our public folks are state employees, our coaches. And so there was this opinion that prevented coaches from coaching out of season. And that was really the holdup here, because we wouldn't want to put these coaches in a position where we're allowing them to do something, but they're violating their code of conduct. So the way I read the bill is that those coaches who are following the regulations provided by DIA are okay as far as the code of conduct. We're exempting them. However, if you look at lines like 6 and 7 and 8, right? If you veer from those regulations, right, then that exception to the code of conduct no longer applies. And in the same way that prior to this bill, you could have been brought before the PIC, and to discuss the code of conduct issue. Now that you veered out of the regulations, it's my understanding that you would now, again, potentially could be brought for a code of conduct issue. Holly, does that, in your view, represent the logistics of it?
Absolutely. And the only thing I would add is that the goal of this bill is to put the onus on the coaches to determine, is the organization that they are deciding to work with, does that organization meet these standards to give them that exception? So it does not make DIAA responsible for, they don't have to approve that a coach is working for the right organization. They don't have to investigate the organization unless something comes up and they decide to. It's really on the coaches to see, here's what the standards are. Now, are they meeting their responsibilities under the code of conduct by joining a particular organization.
And Representative Yerrick, I mentioned that only because I hear you on the enforcement side and understanding how, why would we do this if we're not going to know how it's going to be followed or how it's going to be enforced. So I believe that's the strongest enforcement mechanism there. And I hope that's helpful. Representative Dorsey Walker.
Madam Chair, you and Holly just answered my question. Thank you.
We aim to please, Representative. We do our best.
Thank you.
I know this has been the result of quite a prolonged process, and we've had so much great conversation on it. I just want to make sure everyone has their questions answered. Representative Griffith.
Good morning, everyone. Just want to be marked from absent to present. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Hope the other meeting went well. All right. So is there a motion regarding this bill?
Motion to release.
Release. Second.
Thank you, Representative Dorsey Walker. Thank you, Representative Yerrick. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor of Representative Griffith, I want to make sure your hand, you don't have a question for discussion before okay, great. All those in favor of adopting the motion to release this bill, please signify with your silence. All those opposed, please unmute and say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, hearing none, this bill will be released as well. Thank you to our staff and thanks especially to Holly for taking that one over the finish line. We'll hear it in chamber committees as well. All right, so we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is an update of our current progress and a look ahead to our 2022 schedule. And so I'm going to, I think, turn it over to Amanda for that presentation.
Amanda, we can't hear you. I don't know. I saw your mouth moving, but I did not see, I did not hear you.
I did it again. Sorry. Anyway, I was saying thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to turn it over to Mark because he's starting us off.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay. So very quickly, we just wanted to give you a recap thus far and then where we're going from here. So in 2021, we have completed the necessary holdover meetings, presentation meetings, and recommendation meetings. As you can see, there is still some work on legislation that's still in progress, while the preliminary research is being conducted on the entities selected for review in 2022. We are working on the 2021 final report that will need to be reviewed and approved by the committee prior to June 30th. So you're not finished with us yet this year. We still have some business to do prior to the end of session. So updates on the 2019 holdovers. The Delaware Advisory Council on Career and Technical Education will be released from review upon submission of its annual report, as well as the enaction of Senate Bill 86, which adds a reporting requirement that JLOSC recommended in 2020. Senate Bill 86 passed the Senate and was just introduced in the House, so that is working its way through the process. Council on Corrections, to reiterate a bit from before, the draft bill presented this morning is the culmination of the review that dates back to 2018. So following the bill's enactment, this committee can consider a release from review in 2022. The following entities are released upon enactment of the technical corrections legislation. DIN will be in 2021, fingers crossed, with Adult Protective Services and DVI in 2022. So the updates on the 2020 holdovers. DENREC's Conservation District operations is complete and will be released upon submission of the status report in January of 2022. The Delaware Nursing Home Resident Quality Assurance Commission will be released upon the submission of the status report and the enactment of any required legislation. So that will likely go into 2022. The two entities held over with reporting requirements and legislative changes are the Health Resources Board and DIAA. So that will go into 2022 as well. With the amount of legislation required, the timing is broken out at the bottom of this slide, with the exception of the DIAA legislation and the annual reporting requirements for DNHR QAC. All 2020 holdover legislation is being prepped for 2022. So with that said, the legislation in the works for this year is outlined here. Council on Corrections, again, is from 2018 and 2019. DACD and DIN are from 2019, and DIAA and DNHR QAC are from 2020. So as you can see, this is kind of like playing catch up with our bills. We lost a year. Poor. I always feel so bad for Holly when I ask her to make changes to a bill that that's from 2018. But so we're definitely playing catch up this year. But hopefully, you know, by January we'll be good to go and get all caught up. So that's my half of the presentation. Before I turn it over to Amanda about going forward, are there any questions about that? All right, Amanda, it is all yours.
Thanks, Mark. Can you, oh, there you go, thanks. So looking ahead, as Mark just went over some of the legislation pieces and we're playing catch up, this is what we're looking forward to for, excuse me, for 2022. We accomplished a lot this year. We knew coming into this year that we had a lot, and we accomplished a lot, and we will continue this work into the next session. And these items you can expect to see on 2022 meeting agendas as the drafts are ready for your review. And then the next thing, actually the last thing we want to cover today is just like looking ahead at the 2020 review schedule. We presented information in January, but we wanted to quickly highlight the main differences that you'll see in 2020 reviews as opposed to previous reviews. The first includes the item called a self-report, and that is what the entity will be completing themselves. They're going to use our format, which will include all the questions from the performance review questionnaire that you're all familiar with, because the draft reports that we used previously, that was all the responses from their performance review questionnaire. So instead of staff taking that performance review questionnaire and editing it, and modifying it, and putting it in a different format and calling it a draft report, we're just going to have the entity do it themselves to be more efficient and call it a self-report. The staff is not going to edit this. It's going to be due in the summer, and then we will forward the committee by email, and we can also post in Teams the completed and received self-reports, and then we'll also be posting these to the website for the public. So this is really going to be the entity's first formal presentation to the committee, and it's just going to be in written form. So secondly, the staff right now, between now and the end of the year, we're going to be completing all the research and field work for each review. As we had mentioned previously, the field work is going to include public engagement initiatives. That is an important part of the research process. All of this information is going to result in the staff's findings and recommendations report, which for short, we're just calling a staff report. The staff report is going to take place of the old draft report. It's going to look similar to what we presented this year for the Health Resources Board. It'll have some additional information in it. Basically, we'll recap quickly in it the information from that self-report, so it all ties together, and we're including all the information that we're required to include according to the committee statute. Then at the end of the year, another new piece is we're going to be sending that report to the entities under review and getting their written comment. So once we get their written comments, we will attach that to the report. And then when we come back in January of 2022, we'll be sending out this staff report with the comments to all of our committee members. And then the other change here is that after we do that, we're going to post this in draft form for the public on the committee's website. We're going to post it in draft form because how this committee, how we work documents is we don't post them in final form until the committee has a chance to review them and discuss them in an open meeting. So it'll be in draft form, but the importance here is setting up for the presentation meeting. We want the public to have a chance to see this information so that they can comment on it. So that brings it to the last modification that's highlighted here in yellow, is the presentation meetings. With 7 entities under review and 2 smaller focus reviews, as you can imagine, we have a lot to work to do in 2022. We really want to be mindful of everyone's time and streamline the meeting process. So we took a look at presentation meetings. Now, traditionally, these meetings have been focused on the entity appearing before you and presenting basic facts about their entity, kind of their time to shine, and then the committee would ask questions, and then the public would have a chance to comment. How we want to reformat it for 2022 is we're going to be instructing the entities to really tailor this presentation to the findings and the recommendations that are in the staff report. They're really the substance of the review, because all of their information about themselves and all the introductory information, that's already going to be covered in their self-report. So we don't want to be redoing items that are already done. The entity still has the burden of showing that there's a genuine public need and that they're fulfilling that need. And that's going to be accomplished through that first self-report in written format, and then the public presentation where they're coming before the committee and they're speaking to all the findings and recommendations that staff found while conducting the evaluation of performance and the oversight review process. This format also gives the public a chance to comment specifically on all these findings, the entire review process, not just their information that they know beforehand. So we really want everything there, so it's a more streamlined meeting. And that revamped format, it also sets up the recommendation meetings, which would occur the next month. And the goal is, the goal is to, with this process and the presentation meetings, kind of covering things in the recommendations and addressing any questions the committee or the entity or the public may have, it gives staff a better idea going into the recommendation meetings if we need to make any modifications. And the hope and goal is to complete those recommendation meetings in fewer meetings. So in closing, the last slide here, the rest of the process is the same as we've had this year. So those are just the changes. And just in closing, Mark had touched on earlier, we just have a little bit more work to do for this session. So we'll be sending out a doodle poll for 2 more meetings, and one of which will be your review and approval of the final report for this session. So that concludes our presentation. I want to thank everyone for their time and work with this committee. Your staff really appreciates your support and working with you, and we're happy to answer any questions now or in the future. You all know how to reach us, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Could you pop back to the proposed schedule so that in case folks have any questions about that? That's perfect. That's great. And then I just wanted to confirm the presentation meetings themselves. In the past, those have been non-quorum meetings. Is that correct? Or quorum's not required. In the new proposal, would that change at all from your perspective? Okay. I just wanted to confirm. And so I just wanted to say to the committee members, I've talked to staff about several different models. I think that this is a positive step forward that's in line with what they were gracious enough to present us during orientation this year, which was trying really, I think, to increase our capacity a little bit. And as Amanda said, streamline the process. Making sure that our time together is best used and reflects the most robust conversation prior to, so that we can really get to the nitty gritty and make sure that we can move entities forward through the process. I will just say that as we move along with this schedule, we plan and I plan to work with Representative Dorsey Walker, who will be chairing next year, to make sure that we can set some meeting times, or at least hold some meeting times fairly early along in the process, because I know that as the legislature goes in and out of session between January and June, some folks are out of town or unavailable at certain times. So we want to try and give you the most clarity and heads up as far as meeting times, so that we can have the most robust participation possible. But and with that, happy to turn it over to Mark and Amanda to field any questions or comments about the proposed schedule. Go ahead, Mark.
Just to reiterate something that Amanda had touched on, with the increased number of entities that we are reviewing, our main goal here is to streamline the work as efficiently as possible, because it is going to be more work. So any ideas that anybody has of streamlining this further and getting more work done under the belt in the most timely fashion would be very appreciated.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I think it goes without saying to the staff as well that as you introduce the entities to this slightly modified schedule and are asking a little bit more of them on the front end as far as reporting, that the co-chairs and the committee are available if you need help or just need to move that process forward. Representative Griffith.
Thank you, and please don't everyone kill me when I suggest this, but do we meet, or is there any, it's one of the interesting things I always find about our 6 month on, 6 month off schedule. Do we meet, or could we meet in the fall to knock some of these things out? Or is this meeting only going to be, are these meetings just planned for January forward? Like I get frustrated with the lack with the downtime that we have as legislators in the fall and summer, and think we could do more. So I'm just curious if you envision us meeting in the fall at all. I'm happy to do that if other committee members want to as well.
Representative Griffith, we do not meet in the fall. Just as an FYI, we usually meet when we have JFC breaks. Just to answer your question.
Is there a reason for that?
So Representative Griffith, I think if you don't mind, I think like I said, we talked about a lot of different models, and I'll be honest, meeting in the fall was one of them. The particular concern for this year was that, as many folks know, I'm sorry, my computer is being a little glitchy. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. As many folks know, we're likely to be back in session as a legislature in the fall of this year. And there was concern about different time restraints there with the committee. I do think that moving forward into further cycles, that's a place that this committee could go. There's nothing that prohibits it, but I think that having talked to my co-chair and having talked to the staff and looking at the specific schedule for this year, the decision was made to take baby steps towards a more reform process and really see how this works before bringing folks back in the fall period. But I do appreciate the comment, because I think it is really helpful to think about how we can maximize our time together and our schedule, and especially make the time work for the analysts who are doing a lot, just like we are in January through June.
Right. Well, it just seems like even if we had one meeting in the fall, and I think we're going to come back in September, and I appreciate the decision, but it would be my suggestion that we have one in October or November, because then you hear information, and that then you have more time to flesh it out, rather than be all compressed and making decisions in short time frames. And it's that we have a lot to do. And so if there's anything that we could do in terms of even some of the cleanup work to prepare for January and bill release, that's a big step in the right direction, so that when we gather in January, we can get right to the reviews for the new groups. But anyway, just my 2 cents. I would, if given a vote or an opportunity, I'd say schedule a meeting before we start in January. But that's just me. Thanks.
No, I appreciate that. And I want to just make one more clarification, because as I was thinking about the amount of work we had to do, if it gives anyone some solace here as far as getting those 7 through 8 entities through, the revised system where we're going to get a lot of the information written is really ahead of time, rather than having these presentation meetings be more of a getting to know you introduction to what's going on. I think that's honestly a reflection of the hard work this committee has put in, and the fact that we know that every committee member is reading all of the substantive work that's being produced by the staff, and knowing that we can get a lot done when we're not on Zoom, or who knows, maybe even together in a room once again. So I think that'll be a helpful change too. And I think we'll learn a lot this year to make a plan for the next year. So I do appreciate it. I think it's a great thing to consider going forward. And Amanda had a question too.
Well, thank you. Not a question, but it's just a comment. I just wanted to say that, you know, if there's more interest in this committee meeting in the fall this year, as opposed to waiting, we have 2 more meetings with you guys this year before session closes on June 30th. So, I mean, that could always be intervened and discussed if that's the pleasure of everybody, you know, and of the chair. One of the suggestions, if it is something you want to consider, some states that have similar processes to us do meet once or twice in the fall just for an update meeting. So their staff would present a brief update on all the entities that are under review or any kind of updates, and it just gives everyone a chance to get together. And it's not, you know, a presentation meeting. It's nothing long. It doesn't have to be anything long. And now, you know, with the Zoom capability and being in a virtual format, that also makes it a lot easier. So if you are on vacation, I mean, we won't mind if you join from your beach chair or whatever, but, you know, it could be a little bit more of an informal meeting is what I'm saying. It doesn't have to, no decisions would need to be made. It would, of course, meet all the FOIA requirements, and we would take minutes and all that fun stuff. But, you know, I'm just saying, putting that out there, that is a possibility. You know, we did consider other models before we came up, you know, finalized on this one. And the last thing I want to say is just to encourage everyone to go to Teams. The state has that contract for Teams, and that's a really good collaborative tool. And Mark and I and your staff can continue to put information in Teams even when you, you know, end June 30th for this session. So we can continue to put updates in there. So even if you decide not to meet in the fall, you can still keep up to date with the reviews and the information that we can put there for you, other than the self-report that we're going to email out. So just thought if that helps.
And of course, I appreciate that you and Mark and Holly and everyone at DOR is always ready to accommodate us. And so I do appreciate that so much. And yeah, I think what I'm excited about is that we have a committee that is willing to take on, and a staff that together are willing to take on, you know, a large amount of work for the coming year. But as we saw from the list of entities that was originally proposed, there's plenty of work to do. And I think I'm just glad to be a part of a group that is interested in doing that work together. So thanks to everyone for everything that we've done so far this year. And I think we'll be set to wrap up in the coming weeks with our remaining meetings.
Madam Chair, just really quickly.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
Representative Griffith's point, one of the things that I heard her mention about the downtime between July and December, and I have worked with her, and we didn't have very much downtime since we have come to Dover. But I can appreciate that one would think that we do have downtime, but we actually don't, because we're literally working on other bills, and many of us have an additional source of, we have another place of employment too, because this is actually part-time. So maybe we need to pursue making the legislature a full-time position in that conversation as well.
Thank you very much, Representative. I've got my legislative plate full for the rest of the year, but always good to tackle a big issue. Are there any other questions, comments about the proposed schedule? I think we're going to be really happy with the work product that this will lead to, as we were really happy with the HRB work that we all got to see. All right, well, thank you to Amanda and Mark for working on that, and for working on multiple iterations of that presentation, and working with me to figure out what would be best for the committee moving forward. So that completes our agenda for today. So we did that for you, Representative Yerrick. We want to make sure we're timely. Yeah. And I just, of course, Committee members, as we usually do, we're going to use an online poll to find out when you may be available for upcoming meetings. Understandable that time is getting a little bit tight. So if you could, please respond to that timely. And if there are no other questions or comments, meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.